Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans, and you're watching the John Cedars channel from The Bunker. And I have spoken to many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses on this channel over the years, but I have yet to speak to too many ex-Jehovah's Witness poets. I'm therefore delighted to welcome to the John Cedars channel the brains behind the award-winning verse play, One Foot in the Rave, Alexander Rhodes. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
What an honor. So as I was just saying off camera, you must excuse me if I'm speaking slightly differently. This has to go down in history as the first interview conducted in the midst of a root canal operation. So my tooth is currently a gaping hole filled with all sorts of drugs and goodness knows what. So I'll try and keep it together for this.
Do you know, the funny thing is, before I did an interview with Covert, and I had just been for tooth work that day.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. It knocks you for six, and I've been very fortunate in my life to not require too much dental work. So this is the first time I've really had someone go to town on my mouth, and it left me feeling quite violated, I must say. But there we go. Your story. Let's talk about it. How does one go from being a Jehovah's Witness, a believing Jehovah's Witness, to a poet who's talking about his Jehovah's Witness experience on stage?
Via DJing.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 23 when I woke up, as the phrase is now. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I was just, had to get out of there, and ended up in the middle of 90s clubland in Devon, in Plymouth, as you do.
Yeah.
And within months had actually kind of started working in clubs, and became a DJ very quickly. And after 18 years of that lifestyle, I found myself in a void, and poetry and spoken word filled that void. It was another way of being creative, and arguably a more healthier way of being creative, which is at the root of who I am. So it was kind of a logical progression when I put together my first show that I would be drawing on my experiences, and the most significant experiences being obviously the upbringing, and this time period of trying to sort all that out in my head. Yeah.
It's kind of a common trope in Watchtower propaganda of the delinquent son or daughter who heads off into the world and ends up in clubs and ends up taking drugs and abusing alcohol and all that kind of thing, and realizes that there really is nothing in Satan's system of things, so they must come crawling back, abject, and rejoin Jehovah's organization. What stopped you from doing
that? Well, the point that I'd got to when I left was such that there was no way I wanted to live forever with what I perceived to be just an insane kind of outlook, that there, maybe we'll go into more detail on that. But at that point, I was either like, I'm going to die with everyone else, and that's my choice. So when I made my own journey through that, as you say, trope, or kind of happy to be a cliche in that case, but but when I made my way through that and came out the other side, it was never with a view to finding God or returning to the fold. It was with a view to personal development and fixing what had been broken by that. So yeah, it was not a factor.
How you say fixing what was broken? In what way had your development been broken, would you say?
Wow. Hey, where do we start?
Hey, you use those words.
I did.
I would not be doing my job if I didn't chase you up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and fair, this is really what my play is about as well. No, it's not anything I'm hiding from. But you know, the upbringing, the isolation and separation from what are actually deemed to be abnormal things, you know, the world, we use the phrase the world, the isolation and separation from the world in that sense, including just association at school and with other people, and allowing you to develop skills and passions that you have within you in a sense of after school activities and advancement, and, you know, no career, no sports to a professional level, no music to a professional level. In my case, that was something that was burning inside me. I didn't perhaps recognize it at the time, but all these things being stifled and closed down. And then you have the kind of the very strict moral outlook, which I feel really affected me in developing as a normal person, as a young man. My relationship with women, the list is endless.
Do you
really
think that sexual repression has a big impact on people who are raised
Huge.
in the religion?
Yeah, I think so. Certainly for me, that was a thing. And also the patriarchal kind of almost manipulative, narcissistic way in which we're dealt with as individuals by that organization, is kind of almost mirrored in the way family relationships are run, you know. And it's taken me decades to kind of understand that I had to fundamentally change things that I thought were normal, because they're not, they're abnormal. And that's a big process, a never-ending process.
I'm going to ask you a very BBC question at this point. Was there anything positive from your experience as a Jehovah's Witness?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. And first and foremost, obviously, I had a career as a salesman when I very first, you know, kind of left, and I was still, you know, working as a salesman, and I was probably the best cold caller in the office equipment industry in the Southwest, in fact, renowned for it. My stage work largely comes through the confidence and the training that I was given, you know, doing Bible readings on the platform. Of course, that's a massive positive. And its structure of written presentation, and there are lots of practical things that are really good. And I met some beautiful people as well. Let's not forget that the kind of everyday congregation is made up of all manner of beautiful people. It's kind of almost the back layer and the control elements that feed into that I have an issue with. Not people. Yeah.
I don't think many people who leave Jehovah's Witnesses tend to think of creativity or pursuing creativity as an outlet for dealing with what they've been through. But you're not the only one who has found solace in that. I know I have to some degree, and I've seen it in others as well.
Yeah.
How did you stumble on poetry in particular, and what impact did it have on your ability to process your experience?
Okay, so I had about 2 or 3 years where I'd broken away from a social group that was related to the previous lifestyle, and I was aware that fundamentally I was lonely. I didn't have if you like, a lot of real long-term friends, because this is another problem. You know, you break away, you're then shunned by family and friends. You build communities of people, but for me, I'm constantly worried that those communities are going to reject me. You know, that's a big thing that I struggle with. Consequently, that makes me act perhaps in slightly bizarre ways. And then, you know, that can be a self-fulfilling thing. And I'd been going through this process over and over and over again. Even, you know, kind of breaking and destroying relationships, subconsciously maybe, but definitely destroying relationships. And so I was at a point when I was like, I need to break this cycle, and I need to find something positive that I can channel into. I'd always enjoyed writing poetry at school. It was one of the few things that I'd got positive reinforcement on as a kid. And I saw a poetry event that was happening in Plymouth, and I went along quite dubious. I thought it might be a little bit stuffy and a little bit chin strokey, you know, and I couldn't have been more wrong. It was very dynamic. The work was very urban in places, but there were two poets on that night, Buddy Wakefield, who's 5 times world slam champion.
You don't think of urban stuff coming out of Devon that much, but
no, you don't. No, yeah. As a good friend of mine says, Southwest side. Yeah,
sure.
But Buddy Wakefield was headlining, and he was supported by another poet called Irfan Deliri, who's a Peruvian Peruvian poet. And I was completely blown away. Inspired even. And so when I went away that night, I wrote a poem for the first time in a very long time, which I sent to the host of that night because I'd known her from the rave scene many years before. And little did I know that she'd resonate so much with what I'd written, to the point where she said, "You're on next month." And so I had my first poetry set just like that, which was exciting and gave me something to get my teeth into. It turns out she didn't just want me to read that one poem, she gave me a 15-minute set. So I spent the following month writing more poems. I had one thing that was like 3 minutes long at a push, you know. So yeah, I pulled on all my experiences from
sense, stress, and modulation.
Yes,
pitch, main points made to stand out. So, yeah,
yeah, exactly. And I kind of winged it really because of being confident on a platform with a microphone and stuff is second nature, and therefore that landed with the performance, and it just didn't stop really from that point forward. Yeah. But you asked how it helped.
Go on,
yeah. Outwardly verbalizing your inner angst is a really good way of reframing it. It always seems 20 times bigger when it's rattling around up here or, you know, down in your stomach, depending on the emotion. But getting it out onto paper and then sharing it with people, although incredibly daunting, is also a great way of reframing the way that you feel about what it is you're concerned with at that particular point.
So you wrote One Foot in the Rave, which draws on your, directly, you could say, on your ex-Jehovah's Witness experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
You performed that quite extensively. I would imagine, I'm interested to know what the reaction is. Presumably you've had people attend who have themselves been witnesses.
Yeah.
And probably you've also given the performance and people have responded in such a way as, I never knew that these were even an issue in that particular religion. So talk us through the reaction you've had from the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, let's deal with the different groups that turn up. I mean, the marketing materials are deliberately provocative. There is a poster of, I think it's a Renaissance painting with an image of Jesus with an acid house face being held over his face.
Right. So and blasphemous.
Which is something that has been, I've actually had posters ripped down and removed from venues. So that's the first type of person, the person that comes along because they've seen the marketing and have come along to directly challenge me on that issue. And I know this because they come up afterwards and have said, and this has happened on 4 occasions now, I came along because I saw the poster, I was absolutely disgusted, but now I've seen the play, I totally understand what you're saying.
Oh, wow.
So that's been fantastic. I've never had anybody that's still been in a kind of a position where they wanted to still attack at the end of the show. I think they realized that, and my point is that a painted image of a white middle class Jesus is a projection anyway, right? So putting another image over the top of it is merely just a statement of where are we putting our faith or our belief,
And I guess as well, there's the symbolism of you supplanting your new identity on
absolutely that too. Yes, of course. Yeah. And a fake happy face as well. Yeah. It's not saying that is a good life. I mean, the play does not hide from the truth of that lifestyle. Yeah.
Sure.
So there's that group. There's the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that have turned up have been amazing. It's so nice to have that energy in a room. And sometimes of late, particularly, I've been doing Q&A afterwards. And so that's when that often comes to my attention, is people say, well, actually, I had the same upbringing. And it's been incredible. Even recently, some people that I was childhood friends with came along to a gig and reconnected with them. But I guess I suppose the most important connection like that was when my parents came to the show in Edinburgh. After 45 years of being in the truth, they woke up last year and came to the show with other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses in Edinburgh, which was an incredibly difficult, beautiful, and momentous moment. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why do you say difficult?
Because of the content of the show.
Yeah. It wasn't really written with them in mind, presumably.
Well, yeah, it wasn't written with them being in the audience in mind, but it was definitely written with them in mind.
Yeah.
And it covers everything: relationship with my parents and my reaction to what we were taught and everything. And so, and of course, I had not had connection or conversation with them really for some time. And so when they woke up and then within a couple of months were saying, we're coming to your show, that was a very short space of time to deal with that. So I agreed that it would be okay as long as they came on the last night. And they did. They drove all the way to Edinburgh and came on the last night. And that was a very, very moving show. At the end, I obviously dedicated the show to them, and there was about 80 people in the audience, and the gasp was audible as well.
I can imagine.
As well as the emotion. Yeah. So yeah, that was wonderful.
So that's a big deal though. I mean, if you don't mind, and obviously I'm aware that there's only so much you can share, but lots of people watching this will be in a situation like myself where we're being shunned by our parents. So to hear you say, oh, after 45 years they woke up, if to the extent you can you explain what happened there?
I guess there's a number of factors, some of which I don't want to talk about on the show because they're personal to a member of the family that I haven't spoken to about this. But I think after a amount of time with two sons who were out, I think that obviously takes a toll on any parent. But I think the crux of the matter, if you like, the turning point was when I received a letter from my father, which kind of said, if you're not going to return, that's it. Probably the second time that's happened in our relationship. And I was at a point where I just thought, I'm not going to not reply to this now. So I did reply, and I was open. So I said a lot of things that maybe I regret now, to be completely honest. And I kind of feel that maybe that, along with conversations with my brother who faded and wasn't shunned as such. So my brother was kind of feeding him little bits, including your show.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And I know that those things over a period of time started to raise questions. My dad, being a very inquisitive person, started to research, and it was actually a very quick kind of process, I think.
Wow.
My mum, maybe a month or two after the same kind of decision. Yeah,
Because you've said that obviously when their children are already out, there's clearly a motive for them to at least re-examine things. But so many
yeah,
parents aren't able to find an excuse there, and what you often find, or what you imagine, is that having invested decades in the organization, it no longer becomes a question of is this true or isn't it? It becomes a case of this has to be true
yes,
because I have
yeah,
already invested my life in
invested,
it. So
yeah,
I can only imagine it requiring enormous reserves of bravery and integrity
yeah,
to
absolutely,
address those issues when you're so late in life.
yeah, unbelievably so. I'm in there around 70 years old, so that's a big step
Yeah,
to move out of a comfort zone and a protective bubble and a world into really there in the situation I was when I was 23, with no social connection and struggling to kind of find a new balance, which is, yeah. And I have to keep reminding myself of this because, I'm, being completely, it's not always easy. It's not just a case of you pick up where you left off. And, I still have, emotional kind of reactions to that dynamic, which are unfair. And, and I have to constantly remind myself, hang on a minute, where were you when you were 23?
mm.
Your parents are there now. They're not going to catch up with the 20, 30 odd years that you've had to get used to this,
There was no rave for them.
overnight. No, no, absolutely not. And
Yeah,
I should say also that my sister is still within the organization.
right.
So it wasn't just a case of the boys are out, we're going out. They've now lost a daughter.
Sure.
So, that's a very, very powerful thing that they're experiencing and have been through. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I certainly, doff my hat to them because, you imagine it being so much harder at that stage in life, to the point where you even hear ex-witnesses occasionally say, well, it would be unkind to wake people up once they've reached a certain age. So
I
again,
totally agree with that. And that was my stance on the whole thing. Is like, I'm not sure that this is before they came out, obviously.
yeah.
I'm not sure that them waking up is a good idea, because you're certainly trying to pull them out is not a good idea, because you break their belief structure and don't really have anything to give them back because it's their journey. It's not something that I
Well, you
believe
have
should be
less to
done.
give them. You have less to offer them, given how late in life it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
I can only imagine, though, that if I were in that situation, I like to think that I would want freedom, even if it was just for a few years.
Yeah. But it's a personal decision, right?
Indeed.
That's the point.
Yeah.
It's not, and I'm personally deeply uncomfortable with the idea of deliberately trying to wake somebody up and bring them out in kind of a, because that, to me, that's as manipulative as getting somebody in.
Yeah.
There's like kind of a.
It sounds like your brother was tactful, and I think that
Yeah.
was
Oh,
probably the
definitely.
right
Yeah.
strategy.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. He wasn't pushy, or when he was asked a question, he answered it. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So what's next? So first of all, are there further? I'm assuming there are going to be further performances of One Foot in the Rave.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm going to be pointing people. Will that be on your website if people want to?
Yeah, I write under the name Alexander Rhodes.
Right.
So that's my website, alexanderrhodes.me.uk. I've got gigs in Preston, Margate, and Northampton next month. I say next month. What's in now? It's February. No, April. I've got a month off to work on a new project, so that I programmed some downtime to finish writing a new project. So that's good. But yeah, there
Quite
will be
hard
more
pressure
shows.
writing, though, isn't it? I don't know how you do it, but I set myself a target of words per day. But I'd imagine it's harder when it's poetry. It's
Yeah. Well, I've kind of grown beyond just poetry now, really. Like, so One Foot in the Rave is really a verse play. It's more like theatre than it is a poem. There are poetic elements. But just because of the surge of emotion that came through when I started writing, it actually became more narrative based. So, you know, I do set daily word targets, and the difficulty sometimes is just picking the pen up to start.
Just getting underway. Wow.
Absolutely.
And if there are any watching this who are in their own rave phase, or they're maybe on the fence as to whether to, you know, make the break for freedom, what would be your advice to them?
Well, that's two different people. I'm going to deal with them both separately, if I may. If somebody is in the rave thing, say, have fun, be careful, and don't lose sight of the fact that music is central to the rave thing. All the other things are just trinkets. And be aware, certainly if you're in a situation where you're using alcohol or drugs, that you're using them to enhance an experience, not suppress emotions. Because there's a big difference between, you know, having a good time and blotting out the past. And one is extremely dangerous. And if you are in that situation, there's loads of us that sympathize and will talk. My website has a contact page. I'm always up for chatting to people that are going through difficult transitions, you know. And in terms of people that are on the verge of waking up, I just say, well, keep going, right? It was difficult when I left because it was a very personal thing. There was no internet. There was no network. I just had to decide one day to leave my wife and leave the organization. I was on the verge of being made an elder at 23. You know, that was my entire world. So I literally just had to walk out the door, which was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. But now there are networks. There's Reddit. There's all these other kind of ways that you can connect with people. So do that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wise words from an actual poet. So,
yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, listen, I really appreciate you joining me for this conversation. I've enjoyed it immensely, and I think we managed to muscle through despite my mouth situation.
Yeah, I hope you're going to recover quickly, mate.
Thank you. And again, viewers, if you are able to make it to one of Alexander's shows, I'm sure you won't be disappointed. Please do check out his website and other social media channels that I will make available in the description. But Alexander, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. Thanks for having me, mate.
So viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to the John Seethers channel for more such videos. And as always, thank you for watching.